Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I'm so grateful you're here spending time with me. Now, we have officially entered the holiday season, and today, that's what I want to talk about with you, how to thrive and not just survive over the next few weeks. And I'd like to start with a little story about how my season started, because I think it's really relevant to this conversation. So last week, we had Thanksgiving here in the United States, and my father, who lives in Houston, Texas, invited my family, so my husband and my son and myself, and my brother, to meet him in Fort Myers, Florida, for a week at a little resort that my grandfather built about 60 years ago. If you're ever in Fort Myers, it's called the Outrigger Beach Resort, and it's nothing fancy, but it's a really magical place. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but this invitation from my father was a really big deal in my world, because my father has been caretaking his wife of 30 years for nearly 25 years of their marriage. And when I say taking care of his wife, I mean that he has been full-time caretaking, because she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in her 50s. And he has been her primary care provider ever since. He even retired early so he could take care of her. There's nothing that she can do for herself. She cannot communicate. He bathes her, he dresses her, he feeds her. And yes, he has employed the help of 2 nurses who come in each day to help him out. But he really does the brunt of the work. His first nurse doesn't even arrive until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So of course, this is taxing on my father, who is well into his 70s. And although he is 100% choosing it, there is a price for it. Mentally, physically, of course, financially. And while I have nothing but respect for what he has chosen to do, it is really hard to watch my father be affected mentally and physically by this commitment. It's taken a huge toll on him. And I have not spent a week with my father outside of his home in 25 years because he doesn't want to leave his wife. He's always nervous that if he leaves, something is going to happen. Now, my father is obviously hugely dedicated to his wife, and he is realizing that his own health is declining. And so he decided to lean into some serious discomfort and do something different. He extended himself the grace of spending a week with his kids away from his home. And it was beautiful on so many levels. Watching him decompress each day that we were in Florida, watching him restore himself, watching him be fully present with his grandson. We didn't really do anything. We just spent time together. We hung out on the beach. We ate meals together. We talked about petty things. We talked about hard things. It was honestly the best holiday gift I could have asked for. I think it was the best holiday gift my dad could have given himself as well. He made a decision that I know was not easy for him in order to honor his own health. He had to manage his brain in a lot of ways to be able to come and enjoy himself for a week. And I respect the hell out of him for doing it for us. But more than anything, I respect the hell out of him for doing it for himself. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because you are entering a period of the year where it is really easy to justify sacrificing your mental and physical health for the sake of others. And I want you to seriously consider if that is what your loved ones really want from you. My father has been serving at the highest level to his wife for 25 plus years. And as his daughter, it does pain me to see what it has cost him. And again, I have mad respect for him. I also have mad love for him. And I want him around as his healthiest, most vibrant self for as long as possible. There's a pattern I see women falling into every December. They throw caution to the wind in the name of doing everything for everyone around them, running themselves ragged and telling themselves that they will regroup in the new year. And the other thing to remember is we often roll into December already exhausted, already depleted from the year we have lived. Heck, especially in the year of something like COVID, right? Which really has been a couple years now. So a lot of women are convincing themselves that they can completely dismiss their own mental and physical well-being in December, and they will get back on track in January. Except they don't. These same women roll into the new year more depleted, more exhausted than they did rolling into December. And they struggle to get any kind of traction with the things that they so desperately want to go after. So please hear this, dear listener. December does not have to be a throwaway month when it comes to self-care. You can take care of yourself and have a wonderful holiday with your loved ones. So I want to give you a few suggestions for how you can do both. So here are a few ideas. Number one, take a moment or a few to get clear on how you want to feel this holiday season. Because once you're clear on how you want to feel, you will get a lot more clear on what needs to be done in order to generate that feeling. Just because you have done things a certain way in years past does not mean that you have to keep doing things that way. There's a meme I've seen so many times over the years that makes me laugh every time I see it. It says, traditions are simply peer pressure from dead people. Now look, there may be some traditions that you have in your family that you love, that light you up, that everybody enjoys. And there may be some traditions that you force yourself to engage with every year, even though you don't feel connected to the tradition. So as an adult, the awesome thing about being an adult is we can change our mind about where we put our resources at any time. You can decide to let go of something that you have done in the past because it feels stressful, because you don't enjoy it, because you don't feel connected to it. So give yourself permission, literally within the next 24 hours. Maybe it's right now, maybe it's a few hours from now, maybe it's tonight before you go to bed. Give yourself permission to pause and consider what you might need to let go of to reserve a few resources for your own peace, joy, and happiness. Because the truth is, if you reserve some of those resources for yourself, you are going to, as a byproduct, show up more powerfully, more available, more present to your loved ones. Also, I'll just remind you here, episode 137 of this podcast was titled Redefining the Holi-DAZE. So if you need a little bit more help getting clear on how you want to roll through this holiday season, I would strongly recommend you go back to that episode and listen to that one as well. The second thing I would recommend to thrive through the holidays and to care for your mental and physical health while enjoying family and friends is pick an anchor. What do I mean by that? An anchor is a habit that helps you to feel grounded and centered and like you're coming back to yourself. For me, my anchor of choice is often sleep, because I have proven to myself time and time again, there is no problem that a good night's sleep cannot help soften. But for some of my clients, they choose the anchor of journaling, because processing their thinking or spending some time alone, sort of contemplating what's happening in their life, is a powerful anchor for them. I would say it's a powerful anchor for all of us, but some of my clients choose that as their anchor through the holiday. Some people choose time in nature. Some people hyper-focus on their morning routine, because how we start our day, of course, has a huge impact on how we live our day. So you want to pick an anchor that you know helps you to center yourself, helps you to realign yourself. And when you find yourself getting misaligned, it's the first thing you pivot back to. Because if you're human, you are going to find yourself misaligned several times, many times over the next few weeks. And I always remind myself that successful people, it's not that they don't get misaligned, it's that they're very quick in realigning themselves. So pre-decide right now the first step in realigning yourself when you find yourself starting to spin out. The third suggestion I have for you is to create some white space for yourself. I've talked about white space a lot inside of my communities and certainly on this podcast. White space is space that you reserve in the day just to be, not to do. It's not about doing. It is about being with yourself, reconnecting with where you are at and what you might need. It's a space that allows you to listen to yourself. Because remember, your body, your being is always communicating with you. But we are not so awesome at listening. So white space does not have to be an epic period of time. It doesn't have to be hours. It can be. But white space through the holiday season might look like 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there. You might be able to carve out a chunk of a day on the weekend where you're just reserving that time and space for yourself. That may not be possible, but if it is, it's definitely worth carving out. Because when we're able to listen, when we're able to be with ourselves and connect with ourselves, it's so much easier to honor what we need to stay in a space of feeling the way we want to feel through the holidays. But if you don't listen to yourself, if you don't pay attention to yourself, that's hard to do. The fourth thing I suggest is asking for what you need. So absolutely, it is very easy to assume that people aren't going to want to help. It's easy to assume it's just easier for you to do everything yourself. Stop assuming that you know what other people's answers will be when you ask for help, because that's probably a big reason why you don't do it. You assume you know the answer. Or maybe you're afraid of other people being uncomfortable with the request. It's okay to make other people uncomfortable. Nobody's ever died from that level of discomfort. Stop doing everything because it makes everyone comfortable, but secretly makes you miserable. That is not going to bring joy to anybody this holiday. Serve because you genuinely want to, not because you have to, because you don't. And this is where I hear a lot of, clients will sort of push back and say, but Courtney, serving others brings me so much joy. And they tell me this in the same conversation in which they're sharing with me how frustrated they are about their own lack of self-care. I read a passage recently from Jody Moore, who's a life coach, and she said, joy doesn't come from serving others. It comes from the thoughts that you have about serving others. Gosh, that's a powerful thing to remember. You can think of your own self-care as a type of service to others. Again, going back to that story about my dad, him taking the past week to honor his own care was one of the best things he could have given us. It brought my brother and I so much joy and so much happiness and so much capacity to connect because he was in a space where he could be available. And that decision, again, I know wasn't easy, but it didn't cost a damn thing. It was just a decision that needed to be made. And again, like I said earlier, I know that my father had to manage his brain and be willing to lean into some difficult emotions to be able to show up with us for a full week. So a few things to just consider, like that asking for help, asking for what you need, giving yourself permission to do things a little bit differently, deciding hard doesn't just serve you. It serves everybody. The fifth thing is commit to less this season across the board. Commit to less to preserve some of your resources. You don't have to spend all of your resources. You don't have to spend all your energy. You don't have to spend all of your brain power. You don't have to spend all of your money. Reserve some of your resources in order to be more present. Because when we're tapped out, when we have no energy, when we have no focus, when we have no resiliency, we get highly reactive. And I don't know about you, but when I'm highly reactive, nobody wants to be around me. Also, committing to less allows you to carve out some of that white space. But if you are filling up every ounce of your schedule, every moment of your time, white space is going to be an impossibility for you. So in order to be more present, to protect your resources, to carve out that white space, you commit to doing less. And saying no, pulling back, changing the way you've done things from the past, I realize is uncomfortable. And the argument I always make with discomfort is you're already uncomfortable. So you can have the discomfort of showing up in the new year, feeling exhausted and bowled over, and having a lot of resentment about that, and not really enjoying the holidays because you're so busy, you don't have time to pause and enjoy the holidays. And there's no real benefit to that level of discomfort. Or you could spend a little time getting super clear on how you do want to move through the holidays, how you do want to feel through the holidays. Make decisions in alignment with that vision, and there will be so much benefit on the other side of that discomfort. The other thing I want to offer you in terms of thriving over the next few weeks is to practice sitting with emotion rather than trying to eat or drink or social media your emotion away. The holidays are really a test tube of personal development. They have a way of showing you the work that you've been doing on yourself and the work you have yet to do on yourself. The holidays make us stand face to face to evaluate our relationships with so many things. Family, sugar, alcohol, people-pleasing, shopping are just a few things that come to mind. And you could look at standing face to face with these relationships and the challenges they pose this time of year as completely overwhelming. Or you could look at the challenges within these things as an opportunity to learn about yourself, to celebrate how far you've come, how you've changed, and to stay curious about where you still have work to do. So I hope that's what you choose for yourself. I hope you, when you find yourself spinning out in the space of overwhelm, remember, overwhelm is never useful. It's not a very useful emotion because it really just makes us paralyzed to take any kind of action. And so in order to avoid spinning out in overwhelm, you pivot to curiosity. You remind yourself that you can do less. And you do the last thing I'm going to suggest here today, which is you manage the heck out of your brain. But before we go there, let me just say this about emotion as well. The holidays are really prime real estate for all your emotions to show up. They all want to come to the party. And that's life, right? We have a very wide and varied emotional landscape, and none of them are better or worse than others. We just label them as such, right? We call emotions good and bad. We are driven kind of by a culture that tells us we should feel good all the time. So we tend to cherry pick emotions that we should feel and numb and avoid the ones that we shouldn't feel. But there's really no such thing. Emotions exist for a reason. They are messengers about your needs, right? They have messages for you about what needs you might need to fulfill. They have messages for you about your desires. Emotions are messengers about how you are interpreting the world around you. And if you numb them, which we really have a tendency to do this time of year, because sugar and alcohol and the things are more available than they've ever been, even though they're in our midst all the time. But if you numb emotions, avoid emotions, or label them as bad, you will most definitely not hear the messages they have for you. I think a lot of you have heard on the podcast or elsewhere, maybe following me on social media, that I have a 200-pound Great Dane who is just an absolute amazing dog. And he doesn't have eyes. So his eyes were removed back in January because of a birth defect in his eye's ability to drain. So I have a 200-pound blind Great Dane in my home, which is kind of like having a blind bull that lives in my house. But the reason I'm telling you about Sully is that he is a communicator. If you've never been around Great Danes or you've never owned a Great Dane, you may not know that they like to talk. They talk a lot. And Sully is a growler. That's his way of communicating, and he's been doing it since he was literally 10 weeks old. Now, for people who don't know Sully, they may not understand that when Sully growls, it means he wants you to touch him. It means he wants attention. It means he doesn't think you see him. And that can be terrifying, right? When you hear a 200-pound dog growling at you. But if you spent 60 seconds in the company of this dog, you would quickly understand that the only time he growls is when you stop touching him, when you aren't loving on him, when you aren't paying attention to him. So Sully's growl, which we could really easily label as bad, is his way of communicating what he needs and wants. And if the first time, and I will tell you, the first time I ever heard him growl at 10 weeks old, I was like, oh my gosh, we got a horrible dog. We got a dog who is going to have aggression issues. My dog, 3 years later, he doesn't have a mean bone in his body. But man, does he growl a lot, because it's just his way of communicating. And I offer this to you because I think that's how a lot of our emotions are. They growl at us. And we are so quick to label them as bad or terrible, or that it shouldn't be happening that way, that our needs shouldn't be communicated to us in that way. And yet they are. So if we just learn to accept and lean in and listen, we actually realize how useful all emotions really are. So the final thing I just want to share with you today to help you thrive through the holidays, and this will come as no surprise if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, but check in with the tape that's playing in your head throughout the next few weeks, always, but definitely through the next few weeks, and make sure the track is playing is one that is useful to how you want to show up. Remember, your thoughts are not facts. They're just sentences in your brain. And you do not have to believe them. In fact, I would be very cautious about the thoughts you choose to believe. Why? Because your thoughts generate emotions. And your emotions drive your reactions and your behaviors. So if you really want to take responsibility for how you show up over the next few weeks, I hope for the rest of your life you want to take responsibility for how you show up. You have to take responsibility for choosing to think in a way that is useful to how you want to be moving through the world, which again, you can't do if you aren't clear on how you want to move through the world. So I will ask the question that I asked you earlier again. How do you want to show up over the next few weeks? Because the choice is 100% yours. Now, you can't decide how other people show up over the next few weeks. I know that would be lovely. We all wish we had that kind of power, but we don't. How do you want to show up? Because you can redefine the holidays for yourself at any point. You can change your mind about how you move through the holidays at any point. You can pick an anchor to realign yourself quickly when you find yourself spinning out. You can make efforts to create a little bit of white space each day to check in with yourself. My white space is often in the bathroom because I know no one's going to bother me in there. You can ask for what you need from other people. It's one of the highest levels of self-care to extend yourself the grace of not doing everything yourself. You can commit to less to preserve your resources. You don't have to exhaust them. You can invite emotions to the table this holiday season and listen to what they have to say instead of being so quick to retreat from them. And you most certainly can choose to not believe every thought that runs through your head. So this, of course, is all the work that we do inside of my private community, Rumble and Rise. And in the month of December, we are leaning into the theme of finish strong, start stronger. And the work that we're going to be doing inside that community specifically is getting very clear on how we moved through the year this past year to identify what went awesomely well, what didn't go so well, and then, of course, creating a vision for how we want to move through next year. And that vision is what helps to inform how you start showing up now, how you carry yourself and the decisions you make in December. So if you want to join us for that, you are welcome to join. The membership is always open. And you can find out more about it by going to graceandgrit.com/ready to rumble. I hope this was helpful. I hope you are kind to yourself over the next few weeks. Now, we also have a few episodes coming up in the next few weeks that will also help you with the holidays. In fact, next week, I have a Rumble and Rise member who is also a emotional freedom technique teacher coming on the show to talk to you about how to use EFT to help manage your emotions and manage your thoughts. So if you need some strategic tools for some of the things that we talked about here today, don't miss next week's episode. Until then, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.